And welcome to our studio at Wiz. Where we are streaming this webinar focused on the contribution of retail and e-commerce to the environmental footprint of companies. I'm very happy today to be with our friends from Impact Labs. I'm Branislav. I'm Group Managing Director at Wiz. We are about 110 people located in 3 wonderful cities and countries, and we tend to help our clients to modernize their business and marketing practices. Among other things, we are focused on e-commerce. That's one of the topics today. We have highly specialized teams focused on Alibaba, on Shopify, on Amazon in our different offices. And those topics connect really well with the topics that our friends at Impact Labs are covering. So hello, Vincent and Thibaut and Grégoire. Maybe Vincent, would you like to start by giving us a brief introduction about Impact Labs and maybe introducing yourself?
Yes, so thank you, Bran, for inviting us. Very happy to have contributed to this webinar preparation, and you will see a lot of content. We know like up to 100 people registered, so we see people coming in, and of course everybody will access this after. So we are a company, Impact Labs for Earth, really passionate on helping companies transition from a business as usual to a more sustainable business model. And we believe a lot in impact as a philosophy where you try to reduce the negative impact as much as you can, but also think about creating positive impacts. So I'm the founder of Impact Labs, and I'm together here with Thibaut, who is the head of digital and innovation, and Grégoire, who is attending remote, who is the head of impact analytics and AI. And you will see how we combine all those technologies to try to help transition retail to new frontiers.
Thank you, Vincent. So maybe it's time to start this webinar more formally. Some opening words, maybe I wanted to start with by explaining a little bit why we have chosen this topic specifically. There are 3 reasons. The first 2 are very obvious. Wiz is specialized on e-commerce, when Impact Lab is specialized on everything Vincent just explained. But the third reason is because e-commerce accounts for a growing portion of the retail nowadays. By 2027, it will be close to half of it. E-commerce is oftentimes discussed in the news in a relatively negative way. If you think of Shein or Temu, for the ones listening to us from France, you might want to have a look at and to watch the replay of what Capital has been explaining last Sunday on the business of Temu and how their steep increase in Europe. It's a good understanding of how it works, but it's presented in a quite negative way. With our friends of Impact Labs, we believe that e-commerce could be a force for good and not only presented that negatively. So that's actually the work that we have been doing together. We selected this topic 6 months ago. We spent hundreds of hours of meeting and work on this, on what we're presenting today. The intention is to give you some initial clues where to start at. What's the beginning of this journey to make e-commerce having a stronger contribution to reducing the impact of companies. So we'll be sharing a lot of directions, some very concrete and tangible examples to make it very actual, real. And we'll close with some conversations together on some topics that we believe are a good way to inspire you today.
And we'll be taking questions from the audience too, so please bear with us until the end, right?
Bear with us until the end. Ask questions. I'm having the questions appearing on the screens in front of me. So at the end of the kind of keynote and conversation, we'll also take some questions from the audience to and see how we could answer those, address those points. Grégoire, maybe would you like to start and the document that we have prepared for the webinar today?
Yes, of course.
And give us some clues about the actual footprint of retail nowadays.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Ran, for the introduction. So basically, what I'm going to present now is a keynote on like impact of commerce. And as you know, I think e-commerce, such as physical retail, does have an impact on the environment. And to better understand these impacts, the framework of the planetary boundaries that you can see here in this slide can be used to assess this impact. So basically, it's a set of 9 boundaries beyond which the environment may not be able to self-regulate anymore. And as you can see here, most of the boundaries have already been exceeded. So it's really important to reduce our impact to operate within a safe operating space. And so commerce has an impact mainly on three main boundaries. So first, of course, the climate change. So with all the greenhouse gases emission from like distribution and transportation phase, but also on novel entities with all the waste and plastic pollution. And finally, on land system change with the artificialization of land, due to also like transportation and distribution. And today we are going to focus at first on the climate change, and we are going to try to better understand the difference between e-commerce and retail, and to compare those two models. So if we take a step back on climate, it's important to know that when we are dealing with climate impact, we are measuring greenhouse gas emissions, and they can be classified into 3 scopes: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And the core activity of the company is going to be at first like the scope 1 and scope 2, so direct emissions and indirect emissions due to electricity consumption, but also a little bit of scope 3 with like business trips and employee commuting. But for most of the companies, this part is not the main source of emissions, and it's important to go behind with, on the upstream part, all the impact related to the products and the goods and the services, and the downstream parts, everything related to the usage of the products and the end of life. And if we are taking into account one product, it's going to have an impact on during all the steps of its value chain, basically from the raw material that are needed for this product, for example, like cotton for a t-shirt, then supply, the formatting of those materials into final products at the assembly part, and then the distribution, the usage, and the end of life of the product. And that is common for all products. What is different from one product to another is the breakdown of those emissions. And for example, for a TV or informatics in general, is going to be mainly like the main impact is going to be due to the raw materials. For a fashion, in here, example of a jean, it's going to be more on the raw material and the formatting, like creating the textile. And for some other type of products, such as like here, gas stove, but a thermic car is also similar. It's going to be mainly the usage of the product, like putting oil in the car to drive. And on average, this distribution will represent around 10% of the total carbon footprint. And so e-commerce can help to reduce this distribution impact. Basically, the numbers are a little bit different from one study to another, but it's between 20 to 50% by doing 2 things: reducing the consumer transportation, and consumers are mainly coming by car to like retail shops, and also by reducing the energy consumption of the retail shops also, especially for heating, mainly because like the density of products within a storage place for e-commerce is way higher than the density of products within a shop. But it also increases a few different sources. First, packaging with like over packaging, and also last mile delivery and logistic transportation, especially when you have e-commerce players that have like international storage center and using planes to deliver product from one center to another to increase to have like more fast deliveries. The last point that is important to notice is the return, because basically e-commerce is increasing the return of products from around 10% for retail, like physical retail, to 30% for e-commerce, and that also has an impact. And so what is in global, if we try to conclude, what is the impact of commerce? So first, the impact is on the distribution phase, and is going to be like the first scope that is important to tackle. But also the impact is way bigger due to the fact it's selling products that have most of the impact. And so discussing and tackling suppliers upstream is also really important, and is also going to have an impact downstream with the usage and the end of life. And e-commerce can be an enabler for a lot of different use cases, to have like less negative impact, we will say, from the product by promoting low carbon products, or also simplifying their researchability, basically making those green products more visible, by proposing new business models such as e-commerce or usage-based services, like trying to rent products rather than buying them. And finally, by touching the consumer, by fostering consumer engagement, encouraging green behavior with like tutorials or different techniques.
So thank you, Grégoire, to have walked us through this retail activities through printing, from cradle to grave, as we say in our industry, which means from product conception into the end of life. And you could see that the retail footprint is not the biggest part of the total footprint, but it is actually the window to change everything. So thanks to this analysis, we've developed this framework which you can use to help diagnose what is your starting point. And then across the three phases, product, retail, consumer, devise for the most relevant strategies for your business, because it's different from one industry to another. So we have created those 7 pillars, and I'm going to walk you through each of them with concrete cases, trying to explain what is the magnitude of the impact, which you can see with the little color coding at the bottom. Here, let me just show you what you will get into the full presentation if you're asking for it after this webinar, because we're providing a much greater level of detail on the different cases you could have in each pillar, with some more examples across different industries. So this you will get right after the webinar. First things first, to start this e-commerce shift, we need to have greener products. This is very important because our businesses are supposed to fit into the science-based target, which is roughly a 19% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the next 20 years. And to do it, you need to re-engineer your products. And this one is a very good example, because basically this one is already integrated in this vision of a 80 to 90% reduction on greenhouse gases, but also water footprint. So they made it through quite some innovation, including biosourced ingredients, minimize and recycle pack, also having for the plastic version bigger sizes, pushing for refillable, etc. So you have different strategies. They are very different from one industry to another. But once you have that one, the game is to try to substitute cells from gray products to green products and to do it profitably. So this is a foundation. And if you feel your business does not have enough green products to start this transition, then you should be requiring them. Once you have this greener product, then you can get into something that will be pushed by regulation. You know that Europe is working a lot on those frameworks, and there's a rollout plan from one industry to another to include what is called environmental labeling. Here, this is an example that was developed by L'Oréal, the first movement in the cosmetic industry. And it was kind of taking the visual effect of the Nutri-Score, but this time being pushed for environmental concern, highlighting mostly carbon and water footprint. But this complex methodology did include other kind of footprint, including biodiversity. And this was quite daring because it was a large-scale effort to run what is called life cycle assessment, a methodology to understand the total product footprint from cradle to grave, which means from raw ingredients sourcing into the end of life, and made very accessible for the end consumer. So when they pushed it, I believe it was first for Garnier, 40% of the product were E, and this was a very good and transparent internal signal to try to migrate most of the products toward better scores, B and A. And this was even later outsourced to the whole industry, or open sourced, sorry. So it could be leveraged by a consortium of 20 plus industries. So very important thing to signal what is a good product and to put together some green merchandising practice. Another example here, point number 2, which we call supply chain transparency, very important because this is pushed also by regulatory pressures, especially in the food industry. But it's also coming into fashion and other ones, of course, cosmetic. And here, this is something that is seeing the emergence of many tech players, sometimes based on blockchain or product identity management, to push different use cases, traceability, ingredients transparency, also better using the product for the end consumer, and up to showing carbon in the supply chain. So super interesting case. In fashion, a lot of companies are trying to implement RFID chips, so you can track ownership from the very first ownership into the end of life. The game in fashion being to extend the product lifetime as much as possible. So getting deeper into product transparency, maybe Thibaut, you want to explain this case from Jack Wolfskin?
Thank you, Vincent. Yes, and before we move on to the middle part of our model, I just wanted to share with you this pretty cool case. So what Jack Wolfskin did is they mapped out all their suppliers, they audited them, and then they make all this information available to an interactive module on their website. And they go even further than that, because for the items, you can check which part is coming from which part of the world, where it's been manufactured, in which condition, etc. So it's a pretty transparent model, and it's a service really that you bring to the consumers when they make their choice. And websites and e-commerce is a way to bring services to the consumers. And if we stay with fashion, the key for fashion is to reduce waste. You know, 85% of the items that are bought, they end up into the bin in 1 year. So circularity is one response, but it's not easy to put in place. So that's why fashion brands can use like turnkey solutions that are on the shelf, like Reflaunt, for example. They take care of everything from back end to front end. They collect the clothes and then they redistribute it into their distribution network that is specialized in reselling. And for fashion brands that are actually confronted to this challenge of circularity, it's a way to step in very easily into that circular business model. So services is not the only thing that is possible and important on the website. If you look, I don't know if you remember, but if you look at the carbon footprint of a website, of an e-commerce website, logistic is actually 45% of your footprint. So you need to tackle this to tackle your footprint. And here you have multiple options, you know, like all the traditional players, they offer options with 0 emissions for some of their channels. All the newcomers, they are 100% electrified. They are AI-based warehouse management that allow you to maintain to reduce the returns and maintain a low emission there. There are possibility for the last mile delivery, which is quite consuming in carbon as well, with local fulfillment centers, with greenified options, with bikes, etc. Here you have a lot of players that can help you decarbonize your logistics. And the next step is then to engage your consumers on this. And here you also have multiple options. So within the cart, you can then let them choose, which option is the less carbon intensive in the deliveries. You can have them compensate those deliveries. You can have them choose reusable packages like Hiply or Hopopop. Those are companies that provide those services. And all of this is happening on the website, actually. So we cannot not talk about the website. And here you have a couple of things that you can do to reduce the website carbon footprint. And Footprint compile a couple of best practices, which conveniently happen to be as well UX best practices. So compressing and resizing your assets, integrating lazy loading, all of this, it pays into the time loading of your website. So it's better UX for the consumers at the end. Green hosting of your website, not UX, but still quite an easy step to go if you want to reduce your carbon footprint of your website. And then you have a couple of calculators here. I put Footprint that are available on the market that you can use to have a first idea of what is your carbon footprint for your website. But actually, it's not our focus. Our focus is to say, e-commerce is really the window to optimize the rest of your value chain. And this is what we are going to go back to now with Vincent.
Okay, thank you, Thibaut. That was super insightful. Now let's get into the last stage of our framework, which is the downstream part when we engage the consumer into this trajectory of change. Here, let me start by talking a little bit about how we're going to transform marketing. So first of all, you need to walk the talk and you need to have greener products. So probably everybody has seen this ad, famous ad from Patagonia, don't buy this jacket. But it was not done on a random product because this one was actually a flagship of a green product. For the first time, 100% recycled polyester fiber from bottles, actually plastic bottles, and also with unlimited repairability. And at the end of life, they were proposing to recycle this one into the next fleece. So it was really an example of maximum circularity applied to a product. So when you have such product, you can dare change a little bit the rules of marketing. Marketing was a lot to create instant, gratification, impulse to fulfill a desire or create a desire, maybe less of fulfilling a need. This is changing. You have lots of voices also criticizing maybe the big commercial parties like Cyber Mondays and Black Fridays. This is a bit changing, and we're going to discuss this further in the Q&A. So the responsible messaging is something quite important, and we'll see some shift from many brands trying to push for better usage of the product, longer possession of the product. Don't buy it if you don't really need it. And this is paying off because for a brand like Patagonia, it created a huge brand equity and additional sales, actually. So this is now what led for Patagonia to become the #1 most loved brand in the US. So the message is key. Here, your teams need to know what can be said or not. For example, there were many net zero claims which are not legal anymore. So you need to understand what is possible to say within EU guidelines. It's also a new way to address your audience, so new segments and even new ways of delivering it. So here you have an example of the carbon footprinting of a large bank. You have a huge ecosystem of technologies like Impact Plus who allow you to understand the media mix. So both the message and how you deliver it is something important. So this is also a completely new way to map the consumer touch points. Even if you look at your ad server, you might not necessarily have, like the green consumer segments. But basically, if you want to create a substitution of great green products, you need to really understand the different touch points and introduce green merchandising, green discoverability, integrate circular services, and all of these a sustainable way, which means a profitable way. And there's a whole science here connecting to your analytics that should allow this transition process. Last, consumer in many industries hold a huge part of the footprint. That would be the case for fashion and shampoo, because up to 70% of the total footprint in the life cycle might be in their hand.
It depends on how much they would shower. It would depend on how much they would wash their clothes. So here it was a campaign that I could develop more than 10 years ago, which was showing how much the brand did care about reducing its impact in the production of the blue jeans. It was like a 20 times reduction versus normal jean, but then pushing the responsibility to the consumer, explaining how they could take their fair share by basically washing less. And this led to lots of viral content that was very funny to watch. Sorry. And so in the end, washing less was resulting to massive savings in terms of water, carbon, and even biodiversity, because detergent impact biodiversity. And it's also dramatically increasing the lifetime of the product. So great case, and this was a huge commercial success. And also the brand was collecting like liters to give to NGOs. So fantastic way to engage the community into the journey. You also see now this trend of many more companies trying to embrace this movement of regenerative economy, which means not in the logic of compensation of the footprint, but more in a positive contribution in what your company might be involved in terms of negative footprint. Could be carbon, and then you help planting trees. Could be plastic circularity, where you're going to help recollect plastic in the ocean to build new products, or restore biodiversity. So here, this is an example by a company called Handprint, where they integrate the technology to have this positive contribution in the cart. And they could show for many retailers that it had actually a pretty positive contribution, not only to regeneration, but also to the conversion rate. So this is something interesting to look at, where it's both a business driver, but also something super positive to create loyalty with your brand. So that's pretty much it. We've gone through most of those cases, and I believe it could be the right moment to get into a Q&A with you, Bram.
Thank you so much, guys. A lot of examples. We've been doing some kind of roller coaster together. Very fast storytelling of so many different tangible examples of how to deal with the different dimensions that we have identified when it comes to this topic. I'm very excited about this idea of augmented product, something that you mentioned at the beginning with Garnier, for instance, and with La Roche-Posay. It's always difficult in companies to connect product teams with that are oftentimes on the industrial side, the supply chain, and connect those people with the actual people doing e-commerce, e-commerce teams, digital teams, marketing teams, leadership teams. So how do you escalate the ladder to get to that stage of collaboration in order to inform the actual product roadmap of a company? Any hints, any tips on that?
It reminds me, a bit the digital transformation, where we had as a job to break the silos and to make sure the teams would connect. And when it comes to sustainability, it's exactly the same problem. What happened in digital 10 years ago is starting to happen now, which is transversal teams that collaborate to make sure that there are good synergies. And here, our belief is a retail team, they should not only receive the products, they should be part of that journey, because I told you the example of the disruption of the classic shampoo into dry shampoo, but to push it to the consumer and to change their perception, to change their understanding of the better environmental footprint, to understand the elasticity on price is something really new. And you don't want to push it like this in a large-scale retail. You might want to test it. So I believe showing this opportunity to use retail and e-commerce as a lab to test those new behaviors and how to tell the story is something fundamental.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to connect as well. I think we believe together that we align during this collaboration to the fact that e-commerce team and marketing teams can initiate things on that dimension. Has it happened that way in your experience in other companies such as L'Oréal? Where did it start? Did it start on the product team informing the e-commerce, or the other way around?
You want me to answer that one?
Yes.
Okay, so honestly, in very few companies, this connection happens.
Yeah.
And I would even say some companies don't even have a green product roadmap. So first of all, that's the beginning, but as you have it, this collaboration in some pioneers start to be fruitful because they work together into the green merchandising, how to push it information, how to push it on e-commerce, and after after kind of a proof of concept approach to push it into physical retail. So we can see teams working in kind of a squad mode, trying to combine the product development with the marketing of it and the distribution.
That's quite fascinating.
If you manage an e-commerce website, what you ask for is manage your website, not the product. So you're not asked for this. And I think here, this is an opportunity to extend the impact of e-commerce to the rest of the chain. So if you take the example of circularity, you can use your e-commerce website as a window to the consumers to actually reach out to them and propose to them with solutions to collect and manage this process online to resell behind it. Because circularity is it's like a big chunk for a lot of brands. It's quite complex to put together, and with those options online, it's a way to have an influence on the whole production process. Actually,
yeah, this idea that that e-commerce could be a force for good. We also believe that technology plays an important place in that. Maybe Thibaut, you'd like to mention also what you guys at Impact Labs have done at scouting, identifying all of the technology players that could not only help but enable some parts of this plan, right?
Yes, definitely. And what we believe is also that the sustainable transformation is very similar to the digital transformation. This term has been coined by Accenture a few years ago. It's called the twin transformation. And I don't know, but I'm sure you guys remember the MarTech mapping, which is today like 11,000 technologies, and used to be 10 years ago 150. And what we believe is that the same is going to happen for sustainable transformation. So today we've put together a first map with 300 more technologies that can help accelerate the sustainable transformation. And this mapping is classifying those technologies across the planetary boundaries and also the value chain of the companies to make them super actionable. So we scout those companies and then we analyze them, we put them on the mapping, and we do deep dives on certain categories. So the latest one was on remote sensing. So remote sensing is technology to leverage satellite data to better understand, for example, how you can maximize the impact of your natural carbon capture. And the next one is going to be on carbon management. It's going to be released in 2 weeks. So that's really because we believe this is going to be instrumental in driving the sustainable transformation. We want to be at the forefront of this, and we are able to advise our clients on which are the techs that are the most relevant for their needs.
How many technologies are we talking about so far?
So it's 300 more.
Is it growing?
Yeah, it's still growing. So it's depending on the market. So some of the markets are more mature. Some of the segments are more mature, like carbon management. We see it's a bit slowing down. So we had 2 years ago an explosion of techs that were launched. But on a lot of other topics like water, biodiversity, it continues to fragment and to be developed.
But it will also consolidate like the marketing technologies radar. You could see some movement of acquisition of the small players by bigger one, and we see it's already happening in carbon management. But what we see is there's a lot of also VC funding getting into supporting those new startups. So we hope that now that the next unicorns will be green ones.
You mentioned before, Vincent, this idea of e-commerce becoming the new retail lab. Maybe this idea also that it's more relatively easier to kickstart things from e-commerce in order to impact scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. It's a large playground, right? But so many options to tackle. That's exciting, right?
It's exciting, and I think it will need a deep collaboration between the tech people. I would put the CTO, the CDO, the chief data officer, and the sustainability team. And the good news is more and more it's going higher in the organization of companies as a chief sustainability officer or even chief impact officer. And that's a great way to collaborate. Right now, we don't see this happening much, but I think that people working on digital who are also looking for a new purpose, not only selling stuff and reaching commercial targets, but also helping this ecological transition would be quite exciting. So this is new leadership expected.
Let's take some questions from the crowd. One of the first questions we had earlier is, are we sharing the slides? Yes, we do. So you guys will get a record, even though we have some issues, as you might have noticed with the video, but we made it work.
That's our face. That's good.
But we'll send you a one-pager as well as the slides in order for you to, yeah. We'll try to inspire you with some doggy bag stuff after the session. Getting back to what you said, Vincent, about let's say the hallmarks of e-commerce and selling more. We have many questions related to the hallmarks, Black Friday, Cyber Mondays, as well as short-term versus long-term goals. You know, at the end of the day, I think the e-commerce leaders that we are talking about, maybe some of them are here with us today, are having very short-term goals to achieve. So those hallmarks are usually in that direction.
Okay, that's okay. So how to answer that one? Let's be very honest. We didn't go so deep into this concept of planetary boundaries and reducing things, but physical limits related to energy, related to raw materials will hit us. So there's a whole thinking now, but many economists about post-growth, degrowth, or at least substituting sales of stuff we don't really need to something that is really fulfilling needs. So going from wants and creating desire to fulfill needs. And in that front, you see many brands stepping back actually from Cyber Mondays, Black Fridays, and trying to have more Sober Wednesdays or other events where they're trying to push a different behavior. So as an e-commerce leader, it's not easy because probably you have, especially in public companies, quarter by quarter, month by month targets. I do believe a lot because I've seen concrete examples where you can do the substitution of gray products with greener products a profitable way. And you see it can really work. The thing is, and I do believe you need to be a pioneer, you need to be daring, you need to be brave, you need to challenge maybe your boss to try to push it. You also need a bit of intelligence to finance this transition. For example, you could input an internal carbon tax. So the price of the greener products will be less for consumer to favor adoption. So this is a bit of a new territory, but I think that we can challenge a little bit those rituals to give them a bit more meaning.
It's also Black Friday is also a way for the brands to dilute their value at the end. So it's it can also help that conversation that a lot of e-commerce players are having.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of transfer from top line growth more like a profitability topics. So that's also an interesting way to make that work, right? We have also a question from Margot about greenwashing. When do you start to greenwash when you talk about e-commerce and sustainability? What's the difference between an actual genuine initiative and something that's actually just pretending to do stuff and not actually doing it?
So this is being framed by the European Commission more and more.
And so it's question about regulations as well.
So regulation is helping. For example, until last year, you could claim your product is net zero because you have compensated by planting trees somewhere. And this is, of course, not relevant. And now it's going to be forbidden from next year onwards. At least in Europe, in the UK, you can still do it. So there is more and more definition about what could be greenwashing or not. And you've got people actually like Thomas Wagner from Bonpot or Mathieu Janich. They are the forefront to push new regulation. And they're actually attacking brands who are making non-legitimate claims. And this is where I believe, because there were some examples where it happened at retail, claiming a few things, and then they got hit, right? So you need to learn about what is legitimate or not, and you need to be genuine. And for example, I mean, it's hard to communicate if you didn't start to move seriously about the footprint of your product, about the footprint of retail, about the footprint of your logistics. And only then you can start really disclose a bit the positive things you do. And brands now who are really mature on this are trying to push those good initiatives to the end consumer. And the good news, it can increase conversion rate.
Great. I have a question from Nicolas about D2C and e-retail. It's a good question. Is it everything that we're discussing today, is it relatively more focused on D2C or equally? I have an opinion about that, but curious to hear your thoughts first.
I can give it a try. So I think this can re-emphasize the role of D2C. You know, as a brand, this is where you're going to be able to use this really as your lab, because this is where you have more margin of decision, and this is where you can test new things. So really using D2C as a sandbox for sustainability and transformation. I think it's giving. Ça redonne à la D2C, c'est l'aide de noblesse. So it's giving. So it's giving back D2C a role that is super important in the organization.
To differentiate somehow the experience between D2C and indirect.
Yeah.
And everything we discussed, all of the examples you guys gave, that we have worked together to, all of those buttons on the panel, that could help to improve your D2C and make it maybe more profitable than it was. We know that profitability is oftentimes a concern when it comes to D2C, yes. Driving traffic, driving conversions. So maybe greener doesn't mean as much maybe volumes, but more like doing qualitative commerce on your D2C. But maybe I don't think it's only D2C anyway. You can do that in a qualitative partnership with an e-retailer as well.
Say probably 2/3 of the use case we've shown, and there's more in the deck to come, would apply to both e-retail, indirect retail, and D2C. But we believe that D2C, and for many big brands or retailer brands, could have been difficult to position it competitively versus e-retail, is giving new opportunities to close the loop, basically. And there are some industries like fashion where circularity is the #1 goal. And to make sure that the product has another life as secondhand or is closing the loop into a new product is fundamental. And this is where you need specialized supply chains. And certainly to have D2C working even better for the sustainability goals is to re-engineer a bit the supply chain so you can integrate and don't need to outsource like people like Riflant to make it happen.
It's a wonderful bridge for maybe the last question we'll be taking today. Of course, we are happy to discuss further with all of you on any kind of topic. We'll close the webinar with that question afterwards. But maybe the last question is related to big companies versus small ones. When we're talking about e-commerce and retail as a force for change, for positive change, is it relatively easier to do it in big companies or the other way around in smaller ones? I think that, generally speaking, the big ones are supposed to show the way. They have relatively more capabilities to connect all of the dots together. You are talking about supply chain and product. I mean, it's very complex for small companies to integrate very, very deep technology layers, customization. To me, it seems that the big ones are supposed to show the way, but maybe you have a different opinion about that.
You want to answer?
I can start. And so I think what matters is not the size of the company. It's actually first the intimate conviction of the leaders that they have to change something, that they have to make a change. Exactly. And then no matter how big your website, your e-commerce volume is, then there are many things that you can put together. And we try to give like very concrete examples of things you can activate. And that's why, I mean, there are benefits of being a small, agile company, and there are benefits of being like a big guy with comfortable profitability, and on the other hand, it's the same thing. So if you're too big, sometimes you're slow to move, and so.
The most profitable companies are supposed to be relatively more involved because they have the ways and means to make it happen.
I mean, it's this
relatively more. I'm not saying only, of course. Huh? Nothing radical in here.
Called the impact labs because there's a lab dimension, and we do research with economists, and we can really see that pioneers moving ahead of regulation can really reap an economic benefit. But so you need to be a bit daring. And here, back to your question between small and big, there are some of the tactics we're proposing. It's true that could be more suitable for big groups, but the small one can hack product. We see new brands reinventing a category. For example, there are some brands in personal care where they get rid of the packaging and the water and everything to just have basically small pills you put to wash the house. So there are really some disruptors who are coming with new products. And there's also a whole ecosystem of technology Thibaut was talking about, sometimes full services to do e-commerce. So that's also an opportunity for smaller brands to try stuff now, not tomorrow.
Thank you, Thibaut. Some closing words, maybe. I mean, we are about 45 minutes from the beginning, and I think we are pretty much in time, even though technically we had some troubles. So, Grégoire, would you like to show us the last 2 or 3 slides so that we close this webinar in, let's say, in a constructive manner and maybe inspirational manner? How can you move things forward
Yes.
on your end?
So, I mean, this is a little recap of what we talked about. So again, we've been daring to stretch a bit this concept of retail, not to optimize the 3 to 10% of the total impact, but to give you hopefully some motivation to tackle and work with product teams, especially on this environmental labeling. This needs deep collaboration, and it's going to be coming to you one day. So you better get ready because there's a lot of preparation on data and even computation on this one. Optimizing retail, so using e-commerce as the window to prepare concept of great merchandising, maybe new ways of presenting the product, and using online as proof of concept before rolling out to physical retail. And the last one, which was really to take the consumer on board with you. And this is a story to be told. And now that most major companies are tackling well scope 1 and 2, and I would say scope 3 upstream, the next frontier is downstream, and retail is the connection point to make it happen. So why you would do this? It's because it can be profitable, and here we're happy to discuss about it. We are, a company specialized in not only working on your impact plan, but also the business plan, and to try to put together in a vision of a return on impact. Can you reap an economic benefit for this if you move ahead of the pack? And here again, the answer is yes, but that might be the 5% of leaders or pioneers in one industry, and the others will be diluted because it's physical boundaries and cost of energy and stuff that would apply to you. So you better move now that you're profitable rather than too late, because the change will be harder. So we have developed a little framework for you to be useful. So using this kind of toolkit with more than 30 plus cases. So we have a little methodology to audit and then shape an action plan with you and then execute. So execution time can vary depending on complexity, of course. But we would be super happy to work with the 3 first of you who will ask us to do an audit, and we can make it at cost for you to try to move you into the next steps of the plan. That's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vincent. Very clear, and I think we're all passionate about this idea of not just thinking and not just do the theory behind this, but actually jump into the action mode. I'm pretty much convinced that all of the good ideas can come up into real product inputs, services, online services, a new type of experience. In any case, e-commerce being revamped through the lens of all of the examples that we gave, will put the companies ahead of the market when it comes to innovation, ahead of the market in terms of practices, and ahead of the market when it comes to your career at the individual level, if you are applying those changing and driving change, being at the forefront of that change. So We have this intimate conviction that sustainability and digital works together, that technology is informing those topics really well. And we are very excited to have shared this deck with you. Again, sorry for the technical glitches, but I think there were a lot of slides, a lot of examples, a lot of stuff. And you get some news from us, the replay, as well as the slides, as well as the one-pager to summarize the big topics. Reach out to us to discuss potential next steps. As Vincent said, we will be happy to audit and try to make some workshop, create some work stream with you.
Exciting time. It's not so obvious to connect digital or e-commerce responsibilities with a society journey, but we do think it's a real opportunity and maybe career-wise, but at least in terms of purpose, this is giving a lot of meaning. And I think it's a good opportunity to tackle this now. I think the world is ready for that.
Our impact by saving the energy of the camera, apparently.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much. Have an excellent day, and see you next time for another webinar.
Have a good day. Bye.